Let's boost your English skills.
Hey David, how was your morning? I almost spilled my coffee 3 times before I left the house. I need to be more careful with my caffeine routine. How about you? Anything exciting happened before you got here?
You know, I nearly tripped on my way to the studio because I was looking at a strange squirrel. It was doing some sort of dance on the fence. I guess mornings can be unpredictable, right?
Absolutely. Squirrels with a sense of humor are the best. Anyway, hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in again. Welcome back to Boost English, the podcast that helps you practice your listening skills while having a bit of fun. I'm Olivia, your host.
And I'm David, your friendly sidekick, ready to chat about something new and interesting. Always happy to join you, Olivia.
Today we're talking about a fascinating idea, the 10,000-hour rule. We'll see if it's true or if people just like to repeat it. In this podcast, you'll improve your English by hearing our discussion about that rule and whether it applies to every skill.
Right? So if you're ready to learn about a famous guideline that claims you need 10,000 hours to become a master at something, then stick around. We'll dive in and share our opinions, as well as some fun experiences.
Exactly. We'll also explore if it's valid for everyone and everything, like playing the guitar, learning a new language, or even doing complicated math. But first, David, how familiar are you with the rule?
I've heard about it quite often. It started with Malcolm Gladwell's book, right? The idea is that to reach an expert level, you supposedly need 10,000 hours of practice. But is that entirely accurate?
Good question. Let's jump into the story behind it. The rule seems to come from research on expertise and how people become top performers. However, not everyone agrees on the exact number. Some say the number is arbitrary.
That's true. Also, there's a difference between just any practice and what some call deliberate practice. You can't just do something mindlessly for 10,000 hours. It has to be structured with clear goals, feedback, and challenges.
That's a great point. Before we go too deep, let's set the stage. The 10,000-hour rule is basically the idea that if you practice a skill for around 10,000 hours, you'll become an expert. But do we really need that long to be good?
Some people say yes, while others say you might need more or less. For example, if someone is learning a language, they might become pretty fluent with fewer hours if they're very focused. Meanwhile, other skills like playing the violin at a concert level could require more.
Exactly. There's also the question of natural talent or innate ability. Is 10,000 hours just a guideline ignoring someone's starting point or aptitude? I've seen some folks learn a skill really fast compared to others.
Right? And not every skill demands the same level of depth. If you want to be a casual guitar player, you don't need to master advanced techniques that only professional performers use. So maybe the rule is too broad.
Yeah, it might make sense as a rough benchmark, but it's definitely not a magic formula. Anyway, David, do you remember the first time you heard about the 10,000-hour rule? Were you skeptical?
I was intrigued, but also thought it sounded huge. I was like, 10,000 hours? That's over a year of nonstop practice if you never take a break. It felt intimidating, honestly. But I guess it's spread because it's easy to remember.
Totally. It's a catchy idea. By the way, listeners, if you're wondering how this relates to learning English, think of it this way. Consistent, engaged practice is key. But you might not need 10,000 hours to feel confident speaking.
That's encouraging news for everyone, right? We don't want learners to think they must lock themselves away for endless sessions. Still, progress does demand perseverance, so there's no escaping that aspect.
Exactly. A solid approach like practicing daily, paying attention to areas of weakness, and seeking constructive feedback can speed up your improvement. You can definitely use that method in a shorter time than 10,000 hours.
Some experts even say quality of practice is more crucial than quantity. For instance, if you're writing essays, you should get corrections and rewrite them, rather than just writing the same errors over and over for hours.
Right. Repeating the same mistakes doesn't magically create mastery. It's like cooking. You can spend years making the same dish without improvement if you don't try new techniques or get input from someone more experienced.
Perfect metaphor. And do you feel the 10,000-hour rule applies equally to everything? Or do you think it's more about certain areas like professional-level sports or music?
I think it originally came from studies of specific fields like violinists or chess players, but then people generalized it to everything. Maybe it fits best with highly competitive domains where you need to reach peak performance.
Agreed. For everyday skills, 10,000 hours can be overkill. If you want to learn to fix a bike or bake bread, you don't need that legendary mark. You can become proficient way earlier. The rule might just be referencing the top 1% of skill.
Makes sense. When it comes to language learning, I've noticed people become conversationally fluent in far fewer hours, provided they immerse themselves, practice regularly, and stay motivated.
That's good news for anyone tuning in, especially if they're hoping to improve their English. It can be disheartening if you think you need thousands of hours before you can even have a basic conversation.
Right. I can't imagine telling someone they must wait 10,000 hours just to say hello or describe their favorite hobby. That's not how it works in real life. The rule might be more about exceptional expertise than day-to-day competence.
Precisely. Also, I see another problem. Not all practice is measured in hours in a neat way. Life is messy. Sometimes you practice for an hour, sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for 5. Over years, it adds up, but rarely is it so exact.
Absolutely. Do you think the popularity of this rule might come from our desire for a simple formula? People love clear targets like run 10 miles a week or write 1,000 words a day. It's a neat goal.
That's a strong possibility. We love the idea of if you do X for Y amount of time, you'll get Z result. It's comforting to have a roadmap, but in reality, skill development can vary widely among individuals.
Yes, we're all different. So, David, if someone asks you, is the 10,000 hour rule true? What's your short answer?
I'd say it's an interesting guideline, but it's not a strict law. You need consistent, quality practice to become great at something, but 10,000 hours isn't the only factor. And not every skill requires that much time.
Perfect. I'd say something similar. So, for our dear listeners, remember that your journey might look different. Don't get hung up on clocking 10,000 hours exactly. Focus instead on learning effectively and enjoying the process.
Couldn't agree more. By the way, do you have any personal experience with trying to log a huge number of hours for a particular skill? Maybe that's singing for you or something else?
I tried to learn piano when I was younger. I never tracked my hours. I practiced daily, but I think I plateaued because I didn't change my approach. I just kept playing the same songs over and over without teacher feedback.
That's a perfect example of where deliberate practice would have helped. Even if you did 5,000 hours, you might not get far if you're repeating mistakes. Sometimes we need guidance to grow.
Definitely. And you, David, is there something you poured a lot of time into only to discover that maybe it was the wrong approach?
Actually, when I tried to perfect my basketball jump shot, I'd practice for hours alone, but I didn't watch footage or get coaching. My shot form stayed awkward. If I'd gotten help, I probably would have improved faster.
So it all circles back to focusing on quality, getting feedback, and pushing beyond your comfort zone. That's more important than just counting hours, in my opinion.
Exactly. The 10,000 hour rule has a good intention, though. It emphasizes that mastery doesn't happen overnight. It's a reminder that real dedication is involved, but I guess we shouldn't take it too literally.
I think that's the best takeaway. It's a cool concept, but it's not set in stone. Hey, want to look at some arguments for and against the rule? Maybe that'll help our listeners form their own opinions.
Sure. For it motivates people to be patient and persistent. It also highlights the importance of sustained practice. Against it, it might discourage folks who think they must wait forever to see progress, and it ignores individual differences.
Also, for the rule, it's easy to understand and can serve as a rough benchmark if you're aiming for a very high level of proficiency. Against, it downplays the role of guidance, talent, and efficient training methods.
Exactly. If we're talking about skill development for everyday life, 10,000 hours can be too big a number to focus on. If you're heading for a gold medal in the Olympics or a major tournament, maybe it's relevant.
Right? And that leads us to something else. Are we even sure the original research said 10,000 hours, or was it more nuanced?
I recall it was more nuanced, focusing on deliberate practice and detailed instruction. But the catchy phrase 10,000 hours became popular thanks to media simplification. People love a clean headline.
It's like how some fitness studies get simplified into do this one exercise and everything will be perfect. Reality is usually more complex, but headlines rarely show that.
Very true. Still, it's an interesting conversation to have. And speaking of interesting, we've used some tricky words today. like deliberate practice, innate, and proficiency. Maybe we should clarify those?
Yes, we should spend a bit of time breaking down any tough words or phrases from our chat. That helps all our learners out there, and it's always good to confirm what we mean. Let's start with deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice is when you practice in a focused, structured way. You set specific goals, correct mistakes with feedback, and step out of your comfort zone. It's not random, it's very targeted.
Right? In simpler terms, if you're learning English, deliberate practice could mean focusing on your weak points, like pronunciation or grammar, and consciously working on them rather than just chatting without correction.
Exactly. Another word is innate, which we mentioned when talking about talent or ability. If something is innate, it means it's a natural part of you from birth. It's not learned or acquired externally.
Good one. So if someone has an innate gift for music, it means they're naturally inclined to excel. It doesn't mean they don't have to practice, but they might pick it up faster than others. Next is proficiency.
Proficiency is the level of skill you have in something. If you have a high proficiency in English, you can communicate well and handle various topics. If your proficiency is basic, you can manage simple sentences, but not much else.
Right. It's like saying, I'm proficient in using this software, meaning you know how to operate it quite well. Another word we used is benchmark. That's a standard or reference point you compare your progress against.
Exactly. So if we say 10,000 hours is a benchmark, we mean it's a reference or guideline. It's not guaranteed, but it gives a rough idea of the target. How about arbitrary? You mentioned that earlier.
Arbitrary basically means something is chosen without a specific rule, or it's random. So if you say 10,000 hours is arbitrary, you're implying that number might not be backed by exact science.
Perfect explanation. Another term we used, mastery. That's when you're extremely skilled or an expert in something. If you achieve mastery, it means you've reached a very high level of understanding or performance.
Indeed. Lastly, maybe we should define plateaued. That came up when I talked about my piano playing. A plateau is when your progress stops or slows down significantly, so you're not improving as much anymore.
Great. So if your skill development plateaus, you're stuck at the same level. You need to change your approach or push yourself further to break through. Anything else we should define?
Perhaps deliberate itself. We covered deliberate practice, but deliberate means intentional or done on purpose. So it's practicing with a plan, not just going through the motions.
That makes sense. I think we've covered the main tricky terms. Hopefully that helps our listeners. Knowing these words will let them follow this topic more easily if they encounter it again in articles or discussions.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that understanding the vocabulary behind a concept can make the whole discussion clearer. Listeners, feel free to replay those definitions if you need to.
Yes, and don't forget to use these words in your own practice. Try making sentences with deliberate, proficiency, or benchmark to make sure you really grasp them.
Definitely. Now, let's wrap up our main topic. The 10,000 hour rule might be a useful starting point, but please remember that the quality of practice, the type of skill, and personal factors all matter.
That sums it up. No single number can guarantee expertise for everyone. But if you practice with purpose, stay motivated, and push yourself little by little, you'll get better in time, even if you don't count every hour.
Exactly. Thank you all for joining us. We hope this helps you think about the 10,000 hour rule in a more balanced way. And we trust it also boosts your English listening skills.
As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Keep practicing your English, and we'll keep bringing interesting topics. Any final words, Olivia?
Just a warm thank you to everyone for your time. We love having you with us here on Boost English. Continue practicing, stay curious, and come back soon for our next episode.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone, and keep learning. See you next time.